Welcome to the Financial Goddess channel. Today I'm going to continue talking to you about the series Journey of a Successful Business Owner, and what I would like to share with you is the story, my own personal story about overcoming obstacles in the hopes that it can motivate you and inspire you for your own success journey. So let me share with you a story. We going back to February 2020. At that point in time, I was 9 months pregnant and about to go for a C-section with my youngest. I had two teenagers at home, and we have recently relocated interstate from Sydney to Cairns. Come the day of my C-section, which was 24th of February 2020, I stayed 3 days in the hospital and I was discharged on a Thursday. My plan was to start slowly working from home that Friday in between my recovery and looking after a new baby. For those of you who've had a C-section or whose partner had a C-section, you might know that the standard recovery period as advised by the doctors is 4 to 6 weeks. So as I was recovering from my C-section, we now move on to the 18th of March 2020, where in Australia all the borders got shut and we went into the midst of this global pandemic. Not only did the borders get shut, but effectively everyone has gone into lockdown. This is at the point in time where I'm about 3.5 weeks into my C-section recovery, and I was really looking forward to being able to leave the house, exercise, and take the baby for the first walk. So the government has made this announcement. We have gone into lockdown, and my clients, righteously so, hit the panic button. All of a sudden, I have been in the highest demand outside of a tax season. All my clients were now found in a position that they needed my advice. They needed to know the implications on their business, on their family, and on their employees. They needed to understand what government assistance is available to them. How does it impact their bottom line financially, and how does it impact their business plans? They needed me to help them digest that information. Those of you based in Australia might recall that at that point in time, Scott Morrison was coming on TV every Sunday and he was making the announcements as to the latest changes and the latest government assistance. My clients would expect me to know what those announcements were going to be ahead of time and to be able to advise them. Unfortunately, I had to bring it to their attention that once Scott Morrison makes this announcement on TV that none of us accountants or tax agents were privy to prior to his announcement, that it then has to be legislated through the government. And then the next step is that the ATO, or the Australian Tax Office, needs to put in the guidelines of how it may impact the clients and the eligibility criteria for each option. As such, it meant that post that announcement, which as you may recall I just said happened every single week, I had to make sure that I spend a lot of time reading, understanding, interpreting the legislation and advising my clients in a timely manner of the impact that it will have on them and their business. Now, this was all taking place while I was still recovering from a C-section, looking after newborn baby that I was nursing. And now that we've gone into lockdown, it also meant that I had two teenagers that I was expected to homeschool at the time. As our family, both mine and my husband's, were all interstate and overseas, we had no family support in Australia, here in Cairns. So we had to manage between the two of us, and predominantly I had to manage my own recovery, the nursing of my baby, as well as the increased demand for my services from my clients. Oftentimes it meant that as I was nursing the baby, that was my time to read the legislation, to respond to my clients and advise them as to what was going on and the impact that it will have on them. For those of you that had children before, if you've nursed a child or if you're currently nursing a child, you will know the amount of hours it takes every day to nurse a baby. That's the time that I used to be able to read that legislation. If at any point in time I felt that there's a room for misinterpretation of the legislation and it could be taken one way or another, as sometimes happens with the wording, I would then make it a point during the day to contact the ATO legal team and ensure that I get their guidance on the correct interpretation, as ultimately they are the ones that will be assessing the decisions that we are making for any business. Fast forward 18 months later, my business has tripled in size. I have recovered. My kids are doing well at school. The little one is 20 months old and she's doing very well as well. So how did I overcome that obstacle and ensure that it didn't cause me detriment in the continued success journey of my business? So the first thing is I had to build and continue to rebuild my internal resilience. I did not focus on me or feeling sorry for myself. I didn't have the victim mentality. I did not have an expectation of anyone to come and rescue me. I did not expect my family or the government or my husband or my neighbor to come and look after me and rescue me. I took the responsibility for my life. I took the responsibility for my business, for my baby, and focused every day on doing the best that I can. I focused on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do. I focused on the solutions that were open for my business and for my client's business, as opposed to focusing on what wasn't possible. I focused on creating contingency plans for myself and for my clients. The conversations had to change from what's our goals or business plans for the next 12 months, 3 years or 5 years, as is an industry common, into how do we handle this crisis. It was going into a crisis mode. It was drawing up different scenarios because we never knew which way the government is going to go and how it will impact different clients, industries, and to what extent. So we had to go into crisis mode and have plan A, plan B, plan C, and a backup plan to a backup plan of a backup plan. I focused on what was possible. I didn't focus on the worst case scenarios and what may not happen, as in my mind, the worst case scenario, we were already living through it at the time. I simply focused on what I could do to improve the current situation and move one step forward on my journey. It was the same that I was advising my clients. It was the same approach that I was advising my teenage children. Let's not worry about what the next month is going to look like. Let's not worry about 12 months down the track, because none of us knew the extent of the financial ramifications or physical ramifications on us. So let's not drive ourselves crazy with it. Let's just focus on what is it that we can do today to get us closer to our goals. The next thing is I needed to exercise persistent. I just needed to keep going. Failure was not an option. My clients needed me to know. They needed me to be alert. They needed me to have the latest information up to date. What's good to them to know that I just had a C-section and I'm recovering? That doesn't help them or their business or their families. What helps them is to have the factual information that is going to make a difference in their lives. And being in that position of trust, I took that responsibility very seriously to make sure that I can be there for my clients and to make sure that the information I give them is the most up-to-date and the most accurate information that there was. Of course, needless to say that sleep was pretty much a luxury, especially at the initial stages when you combine dealing with newborn baby that is being nursed and the overall global crisis and the constant changes of information. There was a period where I was getting very little sleep, and I was not oblivious to the fact that long term the physical and the mental health will be impacted. And I was not oblivious to the fact that at some point in time there needs to be a plan for me to slow down and recoup my energy. But at that point in time, I dig deep and I pushed myself as hard as I needed to push myself, and I made sure that whatever was priority each day was taken care of. Of course, it meant that some other things weren't taken care of, and I had to be okay with it. For example, I had to be okay with the fact that I'm not going to be the perfect mommy homeschooling my two teenagers, that I'm not going to be the equivalent of the substitute teacher sitting through the school curriculum and supervising my children's lessons. And I had to be okay with it. I still helped them prepare the study plans. I still made sure that I liaised with teachers and ensured that my children had the materials and the resources that they needed to be able to do the job. But I made it very clear to my 17 and my 13 years old that it's their future at stake, that mommy still needs to work and still needs to look after the newborn baby, and they need to take responsibility over their own studies. It also meant that as we dealt with the biggest crisis from the pandemic and we've gone through the midst of the tax season, that I started scheduling some time for annual leave. So not long chunks of time, but 1 week here and there at a time, where I started scheduling it in advance to make sure that I can financially and mentally recoup and continue to perform at my ultimate best. It also meant that to take care of myself, I needed to make sure that I took the right multivitamins and making sure that I took the right supplements to help me perform at my ultimate best. That certainly wasn't the only obstacle that I had to overcome along my career, and many of you listeners can probably relate to it, especially if you're women, of trying to balance the challenging act of balancing the motherhood with career or running a business. There's plenty of obstacles along the way, plenty of contradictory commitments between children being sick and work or business deadlines. There's plenty of us as women especially that go through those challenges of meeting our obligations as moms and at the same time meeting our obligations within our workplace. And it's not an easy journey. Some of you might have the family support, and if you do, that's a wonderful thing, and I'm happy for you. Others, like myself, you might not be as lucky to have the family support for whatever reasons. At the end of the day, challenges will happen throughout your life, but that shouldn't determine the outcome of the success of your business or to determine the outcome of your career. If your mind is really set on achieving something, it's simply finding other solutions to your problems. If you remember me saying from my previous videos, my path to success, it wasn't a straight linear approach. There was a lot of obstacles and challenges along the way that I had to learn to overcome in order to continue pushing forward on my journey of running a successful business. And whether it's health, family, abusive relationship, cultural issues, toxic relationships, whatever your challenges are in life, I'm hoping that by me sharing my story and sharing this video, that would inspire you to keep going, that would motivate you to keep searching for solutions to your problems and to never ever give up on your goals. You might need to slow down, you might need to change the direction slightly, you might need to find another approach. You might need to pause and recharge your batteries, but don't ever quit, don't ever give up on your dreams. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel.